We called the campaign the Fracture Line, another scrap in a galaxy that enjoys feeding on its own wound. My name is K.L. Ree of the Vor'tak Ninth, a captain who has seen the shape of victory and worn it like a cuirass. We are not friends to weakness. We are a people whose market tables sing of Volatile and Koresh. Still, the Empire is war, and war makes odd bedfellows. When the star charts bled and the fleet called for allies, an enclave of human guerrillas signed their names to our orders with grim, ink-streaked hands. They were, by every Vor'tak ledger, primitives, few light years of jump expertise, stubborn lungs, and a penchant for making mask swarms of their enemies. But the Admiralty wanted bodies and odd tactics. So we recruited them. I did not expect to like them. They smelled like earth and sweat and the burnt sap of their fires. They laughed when shells screamed overhead. They tied grenades to tree roots as if hanging charms. Their commander, thick-voiced, scar-crossed, called Holt, told me, blunt as flint, "We don't die so well. We die loud, and we die remembering." His armor was a collage of scavenged alloys. When he grinned, it looked like a blade. We teamed in the southern ash forests of Varech Prime, a charred ocean of black needles and glass lake mirrors. The enemy, an emissary fleet that had pierced our lines, sought to break us with numbers and siege engines. We were a wedge, Vor'tak precision, and human volatility. The accord was simple on paper. We punch holes, they crawl and catalyze. On the ground it was something wilder. The first assault taught me the human art. I watched Holt's squad vanish into a grove of dead metal trees. I watched them split into noise and shadow, and then, like a single, impossible animal, burst through the enemy net. They moved with a manic choreography that made my Vor'tak vet swear. One minute you see a human shape, the next is a smear and the enemy's gun limb goes cold. They called it frenzy. We called it dangerous and brilliant. In the heat of the second push, our line held at a ruined bridge, while a horde of automata poured like wet iron. The Vor'tak disciplined rhythm held the front, and the humans went to work behind it. Holt's men set their traps, reactive charges that sang at the precise frequency of automaton gyros, decoy beacons that turned pursuit into a hunting chorus, and sticky foam that froze servo pins in a crystalline grip. Then the humans did the bravest thing I had seen. They ran at the wounded engines, and with hands that should not have been so steady, they ripped circuits and shoved fire into fuel lines. Men fell, men laughed. One of Holt's lieutenants, young with a laugh like a curse, slammed a thermite into a vent and sang out a soldier's jest, even as the blast took his boots away. We won the bridge. I remember the way Holt's grin shone through soot. He told me, spitting ash from his teeth, "You Vor'tak bring the geometry, we bring chaos. Both are useful." Chaos became our tool. In concert, we carved enemy columns in half, not with honor, but with cunning. They would line up to face the Vor'tak phalanx. Holt would unspool a line of guerrillas along the flank, and in 20 heartbeats, the column would be 2 columns. And then none. Where my blade could cut proud shapes, their knives made small, precise wounds that bled entire engines. Yet there was a cost. Humans are not governed by our fastidious rules. They are weathered by memory and temper, and sometimes their means were brutal in ways my people found at once appalling and admirable. They would bait a mechanized hound into a village street, and then, when its servos tangled, they would take hostage devices and turn them into incendiaries that chewed metal and bone both.
Vor'tak children are not used to seeing mothers strike with such cold efficiency. Some of my officers complained. I told them to watch and learn. A single night changed the cadence of the war. The emissary had a siege engine, massive, a bell of iron that shook the earth with its breath. It knocked our formations flat and left a crescent of dead metal and Vor'tak in its wake. Holt proposed a plan that smelled like madness. A human team would infiltrate the belly of the bell and trigger a set of thermic charges timed to the Vor'tak thrust. I could have refused. My pride wanted to. Instead, I stood where the faint light fell and agreed. They moved like ghosts. I watched them crawl through oil and bone with only the dim of a single flare. They cut a path to the engine core, while the Vor'tak fleet held the line. When the charges lit, the engine exploded in a waterfall of fire that folded the bell in like paper. The men who had crawled in came out singing profanities that I could not translate and carrying shrapnel like trophies. One of them staggered to my boots, laughed through blood, and said, "We broke the god." After that night, no sentry would call them mere auxiliaries again. The Admiralty began to name them something harsher and kinder in the same breath: allies. The Vor'tak songs changed. They acquired a jagged verse where human curses cut like a drum. But ally ships are forged in heat and can melt in cold. The humans had a hunger in their eyes I had misread, not for conquest, but for being remembered. Holt told me once, late on a rain-flecked roof, "We don't want your tables, Kale. Give us peace and we'll build you a city that remembers why you came." It was a soft thing from a man who had seen too much. I believed him for a moment. That moment was enough. When the emissary sought to flank us through the geysered plains, I watched Holt stand, battered and smiling, and lead a charge that I thought would be rash. He pulled his men into a sweep that ran across an open plain and into a rain of plasma. I expected them to break. Instead, they flowed like rivers and took the flank with a scream that was almost a hymn. The cost was bitter. They paid with the bodies of men who had become legends among their own units. The sorrow in Holt's eyes when a banner fell was an alloy I could not easily lift. We won that flank. We won because we were different and because we learned from each other. I took a Vor'kaar scar across my face in a duel near the command deck and wore it like a promise. Holt kept his grin, but his laugh became quieter. In the end, the accord held, bone and alloy. Disharmony made the enemy speak in broken patterns. War tastes different when shared. I do not know if the merchants will ever forgive us for the un-Vor'tak thing they did, sing new songs that begin with a human curse. But when the Admiral asked me for a report, I wrote only this: the humans are not prey. They are a force of nature. Holt asked for nothing but a place to sleep and the right to bury his dead with a scrap of metal each. He shook my hand with calloused fingers and said, "Next time we might be the crazy ones." I laughed then, and the laugh tasted like smoke. When the fleets moved on and the fracture lines settled into new maps, I kept one of our patched standards with a strip of human canvas stitched to its edge. On that cloth, a small hand had drawn a crooked tree, and beneath it had written a single terrible word in a language I had come to respect: survive. We had survived together. That is the accord I wear now. Ash-bound and iron-laced, and if ever my grandchildren ask what alliances are worth, I will show them this stitch and tell them about the crazy, deadly humans who taught a Vor'tak captain to laugh at fear.